Johnny caught his makeup artist red-handed, but his response will shock you. It was June 16th, 1978, and the tension backstage at Studio One in Burbank was so thick you could almost see it shimmer under the hot studio lights. Johnny Carson was already behind the curtain, waiting for the iconic Ed McMahon introduction. But in the chaos of the star dressing rooms, a far more dangerous drama than any comedy monologue was rapidly unfolding. A diamond had gone missing. The guest that night was an absolute icon of old Hollywood, whose aura demanded deference, and whose accessories were measured not in carats, but in millions. She was due to walk out in 3 minutes, and the irreplaceable diamond clip adorning her hair, a gift from a famous ex-husband, had simply vanished from its velvet tray. The air immediately turned poisonous, thick with the scent of calamity. Producers, normally unflappable, were running silent, panicked laps, their faces betraying the sheer terror of network catastrophe. This wasn't just common theft. This was a potential, 7-figure scandal that could rip through the network and utterly destroy the meticulously maintained, beloved image of The Tonight Show. Johnny, standing stage left, felt the shift instantly. He could smell the cold, metallic scent of fear, a primal smell that cut sharply through the haze of cheap perfume and hairspray, clearly indicating panic at the highest level of celebrity culture. Ed McMahon nervously cleared his throat, sensing the delay, but Johnny subtly put a finger to his lips, delaying the entrance by 30 critical seconds while chaos reigned unseen. Fred de Cordova, the executive producer, materialized at Johnny's elbow, his face pale beneath his stage makeup, the veneer of control completely gone. "Johnny, we have a genuine crisis. The clip, it's gone. It's worth 7 figures. We have to call security, call the police right now, or we will lose everything." Johnny didn't look at Fred. He looked out at the familiar, anonymous faces of the live studio audience, unaware they were sitting at the epicenter of a financial and moral catastrophe. His legendary Carson cool, the unflappable composure that had carried him through 5,000 shows, kicked in, hard and cold. He spoke in a low, resonant voice that never traveled beyond Fred's ear, a voice of quiet, absolute authority. "No police. Not yet. If the police show up, we lose the whole night, we lose control of the narrative, and we lose the story forever. We find it first. Here. Now." He handed a piece of gum he was chewing to a stagehand, a mundane gesture that served as a subtle sign of absolute command. "This happened here, in our house. We will fix it in our house. This does not leave the building." Jetta, the star, known for her dramatic flair, was now threatening to call her lawyer, shouting accusations about the low-life environment of television. It was a pressure cooker of extreme wealth and crushing desperation colliding backstage. But Carson wasn't focused on the screaming star or the frantic producers. His eyes swept across every tired face of the crew, the silent mechanics of the show, the grips, the wardrobe assistants watching for the slightest flicker of guilt, the smallest tremor of fear that might confirm his growing suspicion. He knew that the thief, if there was one, was a ghost in the system, someone who moved unnoticed through the environment, essential but overlooked. A celebrity might steal for vanity, but a staffer, an ordinary member of his trusted family, would steal out of only one thing: desperation. Johnny understood desperation from his own early, difficult life. His gaze traveled past the cable bundles and the camera dolly, landing on one figure standing quietly by a mirror, meticulously organizing a tray of face powder and brushes. It was Martha, the senior makeup artist, and in her total, absolute lack of panic, in her unnerving stillness, Johnny saw something that chilled him far more than any screaming executive could have. He knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his gut, that the key to the missing diamond and the potential scandal was not in the guest's expensive velvet box, but in the quiet, desperate corner where the crew labored to keep the stars beautiful. The monologue music began to swell, calling him to the stage, but Johnny Carson was already focused on a single, silent woman, ready to break the most sacred rule of Studio One. He was about to get deeply, personally involved. Johnny walked onto the stage, waving and smiling his trademark welcome to a roaring wave of applause. But his eyes were not truly fixed on the audience. They were seeing something deeper, a human truth tucked into the chaos just behind the curtain. Martha had been there for 25 years, an invisible fixture. She was the one who applied the pancake makeup so perfectly that the harsh studio lights made every star look 20 years younger. She was the quiet anchor of the makeup department, the one who remembered every shade and every cue. To the stars, she was a quiet, forgettable servant. To the network, an easily replaced budget line. Yet tonight, her very presence felt wrong. She stood by her rolling station, polishing a silver-handled brush, but her movements were slow, heavy, like she was moving through water, weighed down by an unseen force. Johnny, standing at the center of the world, began his monologue with flawless timing, delivering jokes about inflation and celebrity with professional precision. But while his mouth smiled and his timing snapped, his mind was relentlessly calculating the distance between the guest's dressing room and the makeup station, the duration of the commercial breaks, and the exact, heartbreaking look of quiet desperation he had glimpsed on Martha's face. She was tired, not just show-tired, but soul-tired, burdened by a history the cameras never saw. He noticed the worn, cracked leather of her flat shoes she must have had for a decade. He noticed the faint, uncontrollable tremor in her hands as she capped her bottles. Most telling of all, he noticed how she was packing her station. Tonight, she wasn't just tidying, she was systematically dismantling, clearing out small personal items and placing them into a threadbare canvas bag, suggesting a finality that went far beyond the end of a long workday. It was the slow, meticulous, and profoundly tragic motion of a woman erasing herself from her own life. As the panic over the diamond continued to ripple through the backstage area, manifesting in producers whispering into headsets and security guards beginning to move with unwarranted purpose, Johnny felt a sharp surge of protective instinct. He knew that the moment the cold, bureaucratic hand of the police was called, Martha's life would be ruined, irrespective of the final outcome. The shame, the immediate dismissal, the public humiliation, it was a verdict she couldn't possibly come back from. The network security chief was now loudly arguing with Fred de Cordova, insisting on an immediate lockdown. This is a felony. This is priceless property. We must preserve the scene. But Johnny, mid-punchline, knew the network's priority was asset protection. His priority, the secret, quiet priority of the king of late night, was something far more human and complex. He believed, as he had always believed in his core, that he could assess character better than any badge. He saw the genuine goodness in Martha, a goodness overridden only by a colossal, crushing weight of sorrow and necessity. During the next setup before a commercial break, as the camera lights swung away from him, Johnny moved off the stage with decisive speed. He gave the security chief a cold, clear stare, a silent command that said, "Stand down. This is my house, and I decide who enters." Then, he walked directly toward the quiet corner, bypassing everyone who mattered, walking right toward the makeup artist who was quietly putting away a small, cheap photograph of a smiling young boy. He approached her, not as the television legend, but as a man who needed a private, honest answer. He looked at the stark fear that finally flashed in her eyes and knew he was right. The diamond was not stolen. It was borrowed by a life in crisis. He had to act now. He simply said her name, his voice low and intimate, like sharing a powerful, terrifying secret. "Martha. My office. Now." If you are on the edge of your seat, waiting to see what Johnny Carson does next, a decision that changed a life forever, hit the subscribe button now so you don't miss the rest of this incredible Hollywood secret. The nerve center of The Tonight Show was not the famous stage where Johnny commanded millions. It was the tiny, windowless, private office where he now stood, watching Martha walk through the door. It was a space designed for power and absolute privacy. Yet in that moment, it felt like the smallest room in Burbank, holding two people on the precipice of ruin and redemption. The door clicked shut, silencing the roar of the applause and the chaos of the commercial break. Johnny didn't sit behind the massive desk. Instead, he leaned against it, deliberately lowering his posture, stripping away the artifice of the television star. Martha stood utterly motionless, her hands clasped so tightly the knuckles were white, her shoulders drawn and fragile beneath her black makeup smock. The silence was the real interrogation, far more devastating than any shouted accusation. It stretched out, heavy and absolute, filled with the devastating knowledge that only two people in the world now held the truth of the missing seven-figure diamond. Finally, Johnny broke the silence, but not with a question about the theft. He looked at the small photograph he had seen her tuck away. "That's a fine-looking boy, Martha. How old is he now?" The question blindsided her. She hadn't expected cold fury. She had expected the cold fury of the network. Her professional face crumpled immediately. "He's 10, Mr. Carson. His name is David." Her voice was a cracked whisper, barely audible over the distant hum of the studio's air conditioning. Johnny paused, letting the crushing reality of her life settle between them. He didn't mention the diamond, the theft, or the police closing in. He simply talked about David, asking what he liked to do, what grade he was in. He knew if he could understand the pressure, he could truly understand the act. He kept his own eyes gentle, his legendary intensity softened by a profound, palpable sense of human understanding. It was a strategy of mercy, designed to let her confess to the man, not the star. Martha couldn't bear the kindness any longer. Tears flooded her eyes, and the words, choked and raw, began to emerge. "It's David, Mr. Carson. He's been unwell. A prolonged, debilitating health struggle. The specialists, the procedures, the round-the-clock care, the bills. They are relentless. My husband departed when the financial strain became too much. There was nowhere else to turn." She laid bare the raw, crushing truth of her desperation. The unimaginable value of the diamond promised a life raft for her son, a way to settle the crushing debts that threatened to take her home. It was one rash, terrible error, driven by a mother's impossible love. Then, slowly, deliberately, Martha reached into the deep pocket of her smock, pulling out her makeup kit, the worn, leather-bound case that had been her steady companion for a quarter-century. Her hands were shaking violently now, her fingers struggling to find the hidden seam in the lining, a flap sewn in with meticulous, near-invisible stitches, the perfect secret compartment used to hide a fortune. She opened the seam, reached inside, and pulled out the missing diamond clip. It glittered blindingly under the harsh office light, a tiny king's ransom wrapped in a sheer piece of tissue. She held it out to Johnny with profound, heartbreaking surrender. The theft was over, and the judgment was about to begin. Johnny Carson, the king of late night, stood holding a diamond clip worth more than his own yearly salary, yet it felt less substantial than the small piece of tissue it was wrapped in. The weight of the jewelry was nothing compared to the monumental weight of Martha's grief. And in that small, silent room, the transaction was the highest value exchange of all, the exchange of shame for understanding. He gently placed the clip on his desk. The cold, hard facets of the diamond clip stood in stark, meaningless contrast to the genuine warmth and humanity of Martha's tears. For the next few minutes, the man who earned his living by talking simply listened, deeply and completely, as Martha finished laying out the final, agonizing tapestry of her sorrow. She spoke of the constant hospital visits, the experimental therapies, and the towering stack of bills that rose higher and more menacingly each week. "I tried everything, Mr. Carson," she wept, the tears finally flowing freely. "I worked double shifts. I sold every piece of jewelry I owned. But the specialists, they don't accept hope as payment. They needed tens of thousands, and I had nothing left to give." She confessed. She planned to pawn it and vanish forever, consumed by guilt. "I knew it was wrong," she whispered. "But when I looked at David's face, pale and weak, I saw no other option to give him a fighting chance." This was the core of Martha's terrible error. Not greed, but a mother's desperate weaponized love. Johnny, who had always guarded his own private life and emotions fiercely, felt an uncomfortable recognition. He knew what it felt like to stand on the edge, one misstep away from disaster. He had lived a life where success was everything, but in this moment, success meant nothing. All that mattered was the sheer, brutal human fragility of the woman standing before him, begging for mercy. He looked at Martha, the meticulous professional, and saw her not as a criminal, but as a victim of a cruel, uncaring system. He realized that the debt she carried was not to the network. It was a debt of fear, a crushing debt to life itself that demanded she choose between her integrity and her son's well-being. Johnny's legendary cool finally fractured. He walked over to her. He didn't threaten. He simply let the moment of absolute, complete confession hang in the air, allowing her to finally feel the lightness that comes with telling the awful truth. The weight of the secret had been transferred from her shoulders to his, and Johnny Carson, the man accustomed to juggling jokes and celebrities, accepted the burden without hesitation. He knew, instinctively, that his reaction to this small, broken woman would define not his reputation, but his soul for the rest of his existence. Have you ever witnessed a moment of quiet, unexpected mercy that changed everything? Tell us your story in the comments below. Let us know what you think Johnny Carson should do next, and if you think this mother deserves a second chance. Johnny walked back to the desk, picked up the priceless diamond clip, and held it up, not to admire its flash, but to observe its terrifying power to bring ruin to a human life. Then, he looked at Martha, the woman waiting for a final, catastrophic judgment, and delivered a simple, quiet sentence that shattered every expectation in the room, offering a miracle. You're going to put that back right now, Martha. Exactly where you found it. Martha's silent weeping stopped instantly. Her eyes, red and swollen from tears, stared at Johnny. This wasn't the sound of an execution. It was the sound of a reprieve, a shocking, impossible reversal of fortune. She had expected to be marched out, disgraced and arrested, but Carson was offering her a chance to reverse time. I don't understand, Mr. Carson, she whispered, her voice trembling. Unable to process the grace, Johnny placed the diamond back on the desk, his demeanor shifting to the decisive, unflappable strategist. He was creating a new reality, one governed by compassion. You will go back to the dressing room, and you will place the clip back in the exact spot you took it from. Don't touch the velvet. Don't make a sound. Then, you will return to your station and continue your work. He walked toward the door, leaning in close so that the secret remained just between them. You must understand the gravity of this, Martha. I am risking a massive lawsuit, potential sanctions from the network, and a public relations difficulty that could cost me millions. I am putting my integrity and my contract on the line for you. Fred will tell the network the clip was never stolen. It will be found miraculously by a stagehand in the next 5 minutes. There is no theft. There is no police report. There is only an oversight. He was offering absolute, complete redemption, a second chance against all odds. The only cost was eternal silence. The condition, Martha, is simple, Johnny continued, his voice low and intensely serious. You never speak of this to anyone. We wipe this moment clean, as if it never existed. The diamond was under the sofa. Understood? Tears welled up again, tears of catharsis, of profound, unbearable gratitude. Her shaking stopped. She was saved from the shameful consequences of an act driven by a mother's impossible love. She didn't need to speak a word of thanks. Her silent, relieved nod was enough. As Johnny reached for the door handle, he paused. He looked back at her, and his voice held a second, deeper layer of commitment. I saw your boy's picture, Martha. You focus on David. That's your job now. Leave the rest to me. He wasn't just dismissing her. He was giving her a new mission, a moral framework to replace the one she had briefly abandoned. With that, Johnny Carson opened the door to his inner sanctum, sending Martha back into the chaos of the studio, no longer a thief about to be exposed, but a woman silently granted a lifetime of grace by the king of late night. The few steps from Johnny's office back to the main stage area were the longest journey Martha had ever taken, a tightrope walk between absolute despair and miraculous, sudden salvation. She held the small, tissue-wrapped diamond as the potent, glittering symbol of a life she had just narrowly reclaimed. She slipped back into the dressing room area, which was still buzzing with frantic, contained energy. The star was screaming. Producers were huddled, awaiting the arrival of the external security firm. Martha moved like a ghost. Her years of meticulous movement, perfected over decades, now served a higher purpose. She bypassed the agitated group, knelt near the vanity table where the tray rested, and with one swift, surgical motion, tucked the diamond clip into the exact crevice she had taken it from, slightly obscured, as if it had simply fallen off the tray. The return was silent, invisible, and complete. Just moments later, the stagehand, whom Johnny had instructed to wait near the sofa, suddenly shouted, "Found it! I found it! Look!" He held up the sparkling clip. The collective exhale of relief in the backstage area was deafening. The star instantly stopped her tirade. Fred de Cordova, briefed by Johnny, handled the official spin with smooth professionalism. Just a misplaced item, a slight mix-up. Happens all the time with jewelry this small. Thank goodness for our keen-eyed staff. The crisis was averted, the scandal neutralized, and the show sailed smoothly into the interview segment. Everyone was happy. Nobody questioned the timing. Everyone praised Johnny's calm foresight. They simply accepted the convenient, narrative-saving lie. The next morning, Martha was back at her station, applying Johnny's makeup for the rehearsal segment. Her hands, though still bearing a subtle tremor, were steady. As she dusted his cheekbones, their eyes met in the mirror. She saw the quiet, penetrating gaze of the man who knew her deepest shame and chose grace. She swallowed hard, remembering his command. Silence. She could not speak of the diamond. But as she smoothed his jacket lapel, Johnny stopped her. He didn't look at her face. He looked straight ahead, making the moment private, just between them. "How is David's health, Martha?" he asked, his voice low, devoid of the theatrical boom he used on television. The sudden, soft inquiry was a promise, a confirmation that the secret deal extended beyond the diamond clip. It was the true confirmation that the financial problem was his now. The burden had been fully and irrevocably transferred. Martha's eyes welled up again, but she merely nodded, her gratitude too profound for words. Johnny gave her a slight, almost imperceptible nod in return, a silent handshake of conspirators in kindness. The diamond clip was returned, but the real redemption was only just beginning. If you were shocked by Johnny Carson's incredibly bold act of risk and mercy, share this story with a friend who needs to be reminded that real heroes often work in silence. Share this video and let's spread the legend of his quiet kindness. The diamond clip was back on the star's lapel, the crisis was forgotten by the network, and Martha was back to her daily routine. But the true, silent work of Johnny Carson was just getting underway. He hadn't just saved her job. He was about to save her life, and the life of her son, David. Proving his legendary reaction was an act of profound, continuing compassion that defied business logic. A week after the incident, Johnny's personal lawyer, a famously discreet man named Henry, received a phone call. The instruction from Carson was simple. "I need you to clear a mother's medical debt. It must be completely anonymous, completely untraceable back to me. No charity name, no paper trail, just money moving silently to solve a human problem." This was the quiet, sacred ledger of kindness. Carson had Martha's details. Henry, working through several non-profit intermediaries, used a shell corporation structure to route the large, personal check, ensuring the paper trail vanished completely. The massive funds, signed by Johnny and earmarked for a single mother's medical bills, were equivalent to the value of several diamond clips, yet Johnny paid it without hesitation. He considered the cost the only acceptable premium paid for preserving Martha's dignity and restoring his own belief in fundamental human goodness. Within a month, Martha began to receive strange, miraculous correspondence. Letters informed her that her outstanding balances had been reduced to zero. Specialized treatments David desperately needed were suddenly fully covered. The threatening collection letters stopped entirely. She called the hospital, weeping, but staff could only confirm the funds were legitimate, transferred in large, complete blocks from an unnamed, private trust. Martha knew. She didn't have proof, only the silent, powerful exchange of looks with Johnny Carson in the mirror the day after the diamond disappeared. The debt, the unbearable stress that had pushed her to the brink of a terrible misjudgment, was suddenly gone. Her child, David, finally started receiving the specialized care he needed. She saw color return to his cheeks, and the constant fear in her own heart began to recede, replaced by a profound, life-altering sense of security. Her debt was no longer financial, it was emotional, a bond of loyalty so profound it became the most sacred secret in Studio One. She was applying powder to the face of the man who had the power to ruin her, but who instead chose to rebuild her life, brick by quiet brick. Their interaction remained strictly professional, constrained by the promise of silence. Yet, when she handed him his cue cards, their fingers would briefly brush, and in that fleeting moment, an entire conversation of gratitude and redemption was exchanged without a single audible word. Johnny Carson asked for no thanks, no recognition, and no change in Martha's behavior. He simply wanted her to feel seen, forgiven, and whole. He had used his power not to enforce the laws of celebrity, but to enforce the higher laws of compassion. The Hollywood legend wasn't just about the diamond that was found under the sofa. It was about the life that was saved behind the scenes, a quiet, powerful grace that transcended fame. And this private act would forge a unique bond that lasted until the final night of The Tonight Show. Years passed, and the memory of the missing diamond faded into the kind of fleeting backstage lore that Hollywood is built upon a nervous laugh about a misplaced accessory. But for Johnny and Martha, the secret was a quiet, powerful foundation, a hidden strength underlying their daily professional ritual. The debt of kindness, unlike a financial one, only deepened and grew more profound with the passage of time. It was 1987, a milestone year for The Tonight Show. The air was charged with a celebratory energy, and the backstage area was a whirlwind of congratulations and champagne. In the middle of this glittering chaos, Martha was performing her duty, touching up Johnny's makeup during the final commercial break. She was no longer the tired, desperate woman of 9 years prior. Her son, David, was a thriving teenager, healthy and bright, living proof of Carson's incredible, anonymous generosity. Martha herself carried a quiet, undeniable confidence. The crushing weight of shame was gone, replaced by the profound dignity of redemption. Yet, the promise of silence had held firm. Never once in 9 years had she mentioned the diamond, the debt, or the trust. As she brushed the powder onto his forehead, the noise of the studio seemed to recede, leaving just the two of them in the intimate quiet of the moment. Johnny looked at her in the mirror, and in her steady gaze, he saw the entirety of his investment paid off, not in money, but in a restored, purposeful life. Without speaking, Martha reached into the inner pocket of her smock. She pulled out a small, almost invisible hand-stitched patch. It was made of silver thread, intricately sewn onto a piece of black felt, forming the stylized script letter C for Carson. She deftly worked behind his back, placing the patch inside the lapel of his monologue jacket, securing it with a few quick, silent stitches. This was her thank you, a private, physical testament to her eternal gratitude, hidden where no one but he would ever find it. It was an act of profound, silent intimacy. She was giving him a piece of her heart, stitched into the uniform he wore every night. For Carson, who had always deflected praise and avoided deep connection, this hidden patch became his true, silent award, closer to his heart than any Emmy he ever won. The patch would be a constant, tangible reminder that his mercy had given her a life back, transforming her desperate error into a hidden, shared blessing. Johnny felt the slight pull of the needle against the fabric, and he understood immediately. He didn't turn or speak, knowing he must not break the sacred covenant of their secret. He simply stood perfectly still until she was finished. When she stepped back, he quietly raised his hand, placing it deliberately over the spot on his chest, where the patch now rested inside the lining. It was a pressure, a gesture that spoke volumes, a silent, emotional hug exchanged in the middle of a commercial break on national television. That tiny, hidden silver C was now a permanent part of his professional armor. It was the only visible proof of the quiet transaction from a decade before. As the announcer's voice boomed the return cue, Johnny removed his hand from his chest, turned, and walked out onto the stage, ready to entertain millions. But beneath the perfect tuxedo, he carried a hidden piece of grace, a constant, sacred reminder that the most valuable thing he ever saved at Studio One was not a diamond clip, but a human soul. May 22nd, 1992. The final night of The Tonight Show was a celebration and a sad farewell, a powerful cascade of nostalgia. Backstage, the atmosphere was thick with emotion, but for Johnny and Martha, their shared secret brought profound reflection. After the final segment, Johnny sought Martha out near her station for their last private moment on the iconic set. David, her son, now a healthy, college-bound young man, waited outside, a living testament to the mercy granted years ago. Johnny offered Martha his hand. "Thank you, Martha," he said, his voice husky with genuine emotion. "For everything you taught me." Martha, tears streaming down her face, finally spoke the words she had held for 15 years. "Mr. Carson, I never understood why. Why did you save me? Why would you risk everything for me?" Johnny paused, looking around the empty studio. "I didn't save you, Martha," he replied. "I saved myself. That night, I didn't see a thief. I saw myself, a frightened young man who almost didn't make it. I knew that every person needs someone to believe in their fundamental goodness, even after a terrible misjudgment. He touched the lapel of his final jacket. I knew your heart was true. The network needed to punish a crime. I needed to save a life. My choice was simple, a moral imperative. The story began to slip into Hollywood lore. Years later, an NBC executive confirmed the quiet, defining story of Carson's character. Johnny Carson caught an employee stealing something priceless, and his reaction was to protect them. That, the executive concluded, is the legend of Carson. It is the ultimate measure of his quiet integrity and mercy. This became the unseen hallmark of his tenure. The man on the screen used his colossal power to dispense quiet, profound grace, turning one moment of shame into an entire legacy of redemption. The question that hung in the silence of Johnny Carson's final office goodbye was not about fame or ratings. It was about worth. Was the priceless diamond clip, the symbol of absolute wealth and celebrity, truly worth more than the dignity and life of a hard-working woman and her young son? The answer, delivered in quiet mercy, was a resounding, tear-jerking no. The loss of one jewel was inconsequential to the star who owned it, but the loss of Martha's job and freedom would have meant the complete collapse of her world. Carson understood this brutal equation of poverty and privilege. He knew the powerful must dispense grace, especially to those pushed past the breaking point by life's cruelest circumstances. His legendary reaction that night wasn't the calm face he showed the audience. It was the quiet, private forgiveness and the years of silent financial support that followed. He saw Martha as a human being who was desperately trying to keep her family whole. He didn't just prevent a terrible event. He reversed a tragedy that had already begun, rewriting the final chapter of Martha's life, from shame to redemption and gratitude. The hidden silver sea was the true emblem of his character, a reminder that his greatest power was giving a second chance. David's thriving life, a legacy to Carson's compassion, dwarfed the value of the jewel. In a world obsessed with scandal, Johnny Carson chose a quieter path that night, choosing to build up instead of tear down. He showed us that greatness is measured by responding to profound vulnerability. The Hollywood legend was the unscripted humanity off camera. Carson used his fame for the higher law of the heart. The quiet mercy he showed Martha remains the definitive testament to the integrity of the king of late night. If this profound story of quiet mercy and second chances moved you, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Hitting that like button helps us share these powerful, heartwarming moments of Hollywood history with more people who need to remember what truly matters. Thank you for watching.